God bless you. Thank you for being with me tonight. You're watching the Gospel Message, and I am your host, the Red Rooster. Be with us this Sunday night. Again, we say 8:30, but it's more like an 8:45 show or later. But if we're not on this Sunday right at 8:30, just kind of wait for us. Just kind of keep refreshing. We're going to be live somewhere between 8:30, closer to 8:45. We're going to be talking about the gathering of Israel again. We got into it a little bit last time. It went kind of long. We're going to take it up again, and we'll probably put on the group something along the lines of maybe the blessings and the blessings of Israel. What actually makes Israel blessed? Maybe the blessings and the curses, something along those lines. But we're going to continue about the gathering of Israel this Sunday night, 8:30, 8:45. I want to get in just a little bit tonight, still touching on Israel. Um, and I just have a big question, as you can tell. Why Israel? Why? Why did it take all these catastrophic, horrible things to happen to them um, over the years? And and I know we look at Israel to this day, and we look at them. Well, they are blessed as far as coming back to their homeland. I mean, I'll give you that. And I think it's incredible that after everything that they've been through for over 3,000 years, from kingdom to kingdom and bondage to bondage, and all of these catastrophic things happening to them, for them to be dispersed and destroyed like they were in 70 A.D. And lose millions in the 1940s, and still manage to come back to their homeland, where their temple was, where Jerusalem was, where God chose to put His name in Jerusalem, in their temple. I think it's a miracle, and it's the act of God that got them back to where they are today. But the question always comes back is, why did all that happen in the first place? And what I'm seeing today is not much difference than the past. And when I say that as, and if my numbers are wrong, tell me, but I believe that if you look up Israel and the Christian population, it's less than 5%, 2%, 3%, and a lot of them are not even Jewish people themselves, Israelites themselves. So, and I'm looking at Israel coming back together, and I'm thinking, that's amazing. God did allow them to come back, and He brought them back, and there's Bible for these things. But then I look at the prophecies, and I look at what they're supposed to be doing when they come back to their homeland. And I've been looking at things a little bit different. Is it a natural gathering into a natural land, or is it a spiritual gathering into a spiritual land? And we'll talk more about that Sunday night. But the question tonight is, why did all this have to happen? And we get into Romans 11. We did that the other week. You can go back and look at that broadcast. The Bible says that they were cut off. The natural branches were cut off, that we, the Gentiles, might be grafted in. That's the 11th chapter of Romans. And I'm thankful for that. God did not cut them off to keep them cut off, but they were cut off, Romans 11 says, because of unbelief. I look at Israel today, and I still see a nation mostly, almost entirely, of unbelief of their Messiah. So that's not good, and I'm asking why. Why is this a continual, when will their eyes be open? And I just want to start out, this is Psalms, well, it's all good, but let's do Psalm 78 and 4. Psalm 78 and 4, reading down, we're going to skip through a little bit. He says, "We will not hide them from our children, the word of God, the sayings of God, showing to the generation to come the praises of God and His strength and His wonderful works that He hath done. For He hath established a testimony in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, which He commanded our fathers, that they should make them known to their children, that the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born." This ties in to a children being born When Jesus came, he said, marvel not that you must be born again. This all gets into, from the natural Jews, from the natural Israelites, into a spiritual birth that would bring us all together in one. But we're not going to get in there tonight. We're just going to keep reading. That the generation to come might know them, even the children which should be born, who should arise and declare them to their children, that they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments. Listen to what he says. And might not be as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation. They were a stubborn and rebellious generation. Stubborn, rebellious. If I can spell, rebellious. Stubborn, rebellious people. You're going to see throughout the Bible that the Jewish people, the Israelites, when God would speak to them, it was not hardly any time would go by and they would begin to stub up. They would begin to buck up. They would begin to rebel against God. And you follow down Abraham and Isaac and Jacob. His name changed to Israel, and Israel came forth 12 tribes. They went into bondage. And the very brother that they sold out, Joseph, arose in Egypt to rule over Egypt next to the king. And when Israel came into Egypt, they were a blessed people. Joseph was there to help them, to give them food, to help them to prosper, to dwell safely. And before long, they got in bondage very quickly. When they got into bondage, they started crying out to God. Now here's the beautiful part. Every time Israel was in bondage and they began to cry out to God, no matter how stubborn or rebellious they were, God would hear them if they truly were turning to God with their heart, with their mind, heart, and soul. If they were genuine about it, God heard from heaven. And God would deliver them. He brought them out of Egypt by the hand of Moses, and when he brought them out, they immediately began to complain for thirst. Then they wanted meat. The manna wasn't good enough. I mean, just continually, they would not shut up, but they complained. Oh, that's another one. They complained. Let's just put, they complained. They complained a lot. And I get to thinking, why were these things happening to Israel over and over and over again? Why? And then I look at the church today as the body of Christ. It's supposed to be the true Israel, right? Let's just get this real quick, just so nobody, I don't want anybody to think I'm quoting anything out of context. Let's just get Romans real fast. And it's either 2 or 3. Just real quick. Romans 2 and 28. For he is not a Jew which was one outwardly, neither is that circumcision which was outward in the flesh. This is Paul's teachings about the true Jewish nation in God's eyes. Israelites, the real ones. He said, but he is a Jew which was one inwardly. We are in the tribe of Judah. We are in Jesus, the line of the tribe of Judah. But he is a Jew which is one inwardly. The circumcision is that of the heart in the spirit, and not in the letter, not of the law, whose praise is not of men, but of God. This is why Israel has suffered so much. Read these next few verses. What advantage then hath the Jew? The natural. Or what profit is there of the circumcision? The natural Jew, natural circumcision. He says much every way, because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. Moses brought them out of bondage, out of Egypt. He was going to bring them into the land of promise. He clothed them. God clothed them. God took care of them. God fed them by the leading of Moses through the wilderness. But the whole 40 years that they wandered in the wilderness was in stubbornness, rebellion, and complaining. All 40 years. Finally, God told him, he said, you know what? And this is what blows my mind. People say, well, Israel's blessed. Well, are they? After 40 years of consistency of all this, after God delivered them, God told Moses, he said, stand back, let me just destroy them all. But Moses stood in the gap, and he asked God for mercy. God withheld his wrath because of Moses. That's a type of Jesus. I can see that. I'm sure you can too. Even Moses said, a prophet like unto me shall the Lord your God raise up unto you of your brethren, of the Jews, of the Israelites. Him shall ye hear in all things. And whatever soul will not hear that prophet, he shall be cut off from among the people. Wait a second. There's two manner of people. There's the natural, stubborn, rebellious complainers that are cut off from among the people. Who are those people? Those are the people of God. The true believers of faith. The true Israel. But listen to what happened. So, and we're going to get back to the Psalms and Romans. And he said, chiefly in Romans 3, he said, but much in every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. During those 40 years, in the beginning, God sent them down instruction by the hand of Moses. His face from the glory of God was shining to where Israel couldn't even look at it. He had to put a veil over his face. That veil is still there today in 2 Corinthians, the 3rd chapter. And he says that same veil is done away in Christ. When that veil is taken off the heart, when the eyes can actually see, they'll see the Son of God. They're not doing it. Why? They're still stubborn, they're still rebellious, and they're still complaining. What do they want? What does Israel want? I want you to go look them up. I want you to go look up their teachers, their rabbis. And I want you to see what actually Israel as a whole wants. I just put it in here. They want something. And they want this. If I can spell. They want that. And I did spell it right the first time. They want a temple. But I have a question for you. Is this going to open their eyes to the Messiah? Because they're still stubborn, they're still rebellious, they're still complaining, they still want this. This is the very thing that after Moses led them through the wilderness, after they was given commandments to lead them and a law to guide them, after all that, they finally got to the place where God said, you know what? Before this came, he said, I'm just going to let you all die in the wilderness. Did you know he did that? God let every one of them die in the wilderness, and their children from about 20 years or so and up, he let them come into the promised land. But I thought Israel was blessed. I thought they were blessed. Why would God let them all die and not get to the promised land? Because of this, and this. Now, watch what happens. They come into the promised land. They listen to Joshua for a while. And after the death of Joshua, they began to do this and this and this again. Judges were raised up. They would call on God and deliver them over and over and over again. Years and years of stubbornness, rebellious, would not listen to God. Finally, God gave them a king because they rejected God again. And God told Samuel, he said, hey Samuel, they've not rejected you, but they've rejected me. They still did not want to listen to God because of these things. They wanted someone to rule over them that they could see. And very quickly, that king that God gave them was going to build him a temple. For about 3,000 years, this was everything to them. Their sacrifices, the law that Moses gave them, the yearly atonement, their high priests, their garments, their pride, their stubbornness and their rebelliousness, they still had this through it all. until it came time to where this blessed people that everybody's saying so blessed because they're just Israel. When the time came for a king and to make a temple, it got so bad that this temple was destroyed 2 times. These blessed people that mainstream Christianity says, oh, they're blessed, they're Israel. God destroyed not just their temple, but He would destroy their kings and He would destroy their people. And you know what He did with them? He scattered them over and over again. Now these people is what mainstream Christianity says are blessed. They are blessed because they're Israel. Now here's a problem. And I didn't think I'd get into, well, we're still going to keep it for Sunday night. I'm just going through a quick little timeline of Israel. What did we just read in Romans 3? 3 and 2, he said, much every way, chiefly because that unto them were committed the oracles of God. They commune with God. They heard His voice on the mount with Moses. They seen Him descend and His bodily presence was there. They still turned around and made a golden calf. These are blessed people, is what they're saying. They're blessed. I don't see that. What I see is God dealing with a natural nation of people to bring forth His king, His son. God worked through them to bring forth His son. But here's something amazing that happens, and let's just do this. Let's just erase this here just a second. Let's just get rid of this just a second. The whole time, after God gave them their kings, He gave them their temples. Then He let them go back and build the temple again and come right back into Jerusalem. Remember Cyrus? He made a decree that Israel could come back in. And you had Ezra and Nehemiah. They came in. They began to work on the second temple. And God let them. He had mercy on them. For His name's sake, not just because they were a blessed people, but because of His name's sake. See, God said He magnified His word above His name. When He sent His Son, this is the beautiful part, they complained. They were rebellious. They were stubborn for thousands, we'll just say 3,000 years. Then finally, in the fullness of time, God sent His Son, the true King. What do you think happened when the Son came, when the King came? They were still stubborn, they were still rebellious, and they still complained. They said, you know what, Jesus, you're a blasphemer, because thou makest thyself God. They ignored the oracles of God that came down through Moses. They ignored the writings of the prophets that came down over thousands of years. They ignored it all because they were stubborn, rebellious, and they complained for over 3,000 years. But yet, most Christians today say that they are a blessed people. I'm still trying to figure that out. Now, don't get me wrong. I'm going to confess something. I have been a Zionist, strong Zionist in times past. I'll admit to you. And I still support Israel dwelling in their homeland in peace. I support you dwelling in your homeland in peace. I support anybody dwelling in their homeland in peace. But to say they're special, I can't do that. Matter of fact, it's actually worse for them, because once they actually received the oracles and commandments of God and had thousands of years to obey and to prepare and to accept the true King, the Son of God, when that fullness of time came, when Jesus was born, they have a bigger responsibility to see Him. They have a bigger responsibility to see the Son of God than the Gentiles did. Because the Gentiles, for the most part, didn't follow them. You had little bits and pieces of them that did, sure. And they arranged for that when you go back and look in the law. But through their fall, salvation has come to the Gentiles, to us. I thank God for that. Do I believe that Israel has the same chance as the Gentiles do? Absolutely. But see, since Jesus came and died, it's called Calvary. It's level ground. If you don't accept the Son of God, the true Prince of Peace, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, you are not special. You are not blessed. You are not held up on a pedestal in God's eyes. Matter of fact, God's angry because they're still stubborn, rebellious, and complaining, waiting for their future Messiah. And not just that, they're wanting back their temple that became an idol house. Let's just keep going. And now that I'm through the timeline, let's go back to Psalms, getting the scriptures. And I haven't said anything that wasn't scripture, but I couldn't go to everything and get through the story that fast. So, Psalm 78. This is the people and what happened to them that mainstream Christianity says, well, they're blessed. 8th verse. Same chapter, Psalm 78 and 8. Well, let's do 7 too. That they might set their hope in God and not forget the works of God, but keep His commandments. Be not as their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation that set not their heart aright, whose spirit was not steadfast with God. I want you to jump down to 10th verse. They kept not the covenant of God and refused to walk. Wait a second. They refused, and this is important, they refused to walk in His commandments. That's the problem with the whole world today. Me, you, and all the host of Israel, is people are refusing to walk in the commandments of God. You come to the Western world, United States of America, and then they'll preach you this once saved, always saved, just believe, you ain't got to do jack, and they say that's salvation. You go over to Israel, and they say, no, you don't follow Jesus, you don't follow Him, you wait till we build the temple, we'll start making sacrifices, we don't have to walk in that, in your Jesus' footsteps. So when it comes down to it, the whole world has the same problem that Israel's had for 3,000 years. They're stubborn, they're rebellious, they complain, and they refuse to walk in the footsteps of the Son of God. It ain't just Israel's problem, it's the whole world's problem. Nobody wants to submit to God's Son, God's will, God's King. Nobody wants to do it. Now, and this is what happens. So I want you to stay in the 78th chapter. And I just want you to go, it's a long chapter, so I just want to skip through. And I want you to do, it's all good. 51st verse. And this goes back to the days of Egypt and Moses. But he said, and he smote all the firstborn in Egypt, the chief of their strength and tabernacles of Ham. But he made his own people to go forth like sheep. He delivered them and guided them in the wilderness like a flock. See that sheep? See that church in the wilderness? But made his own people to go forth like sheep, guided them as wilderness like a flock. He led them on safely so that they feared not. But the sea overwhelmed their enemies. Listen closely. But he brought them into the border of his sanctuary, even to his mountain, to this mountain which his right hand had purchased. He cast out the heathen also before them and divided them an inheritance by line and made the tribes of Israel to dwell in their tents. He brought them all the way to the promised land, the children, and he put them in there safely. What happened? Yet they tempted and provoked God. You know what it calls it in the 3rd chapter of Hebrews? It calls it a day of temptation in the wilderness. A day of provoking God. It was a time frame that all Israel provoked and tempted God in the wilderness. Why? Because they were stubborn, rebellious, complained. So they tempted him. They provoked him. But that's a blessed people, right? Just because they're Israel. They tempted. They provoked. Listen to what happened to these natural bloodline Israelites. You like the quotation marks. They tempted and provoked the Most High and kept not his test. They turned back and dealt unfaithfully like their fathers. They were turned aside like a deceitful bow. They provoked him to anger with their high places, moved him to jealousy with their graven images. When God heard this, he was wroth, he was angry, and greatly abhorred Israel. But God, they're blessed. Lord, they're blessed. Don't forget that, right? I'm trying to figure this out. He abhorred them, so that he forsook the tabernacle of Shiloh, the tent which he placed among them. Even when they began, where they put the commandments, the stones that had the 10 commandments, they put them in the ark, put them in a tent in Shiloh, where it began to dwell. God still forsook that every time they began to be rebellious. The temple came, same thing. And we're going to get into the temple, and I'm going to try to come to a close. I don't want to get too long. Now we're not bad. Listen to what happened. 61, delivered his strength into captivity and his glory into the enemy's hand. Why would God give his glory into the enemy's hands? I thought they were blessed. He gave his people over also unto the sword and was wroth with his inheritance. He let his people get butchered by the sword. That sounds very blessed to me, doesn't it, you? So I'm looking at Israel today, and they're still rejecting the Son of God, the King. They're still wanting their temple back. Is God looking at them any different than he has over the past 3,000 years? I mean, you can ask anybody in the body of Christ, the church today, if I leave the body of Christ, the believing Gentiles and Jews together, that mountain of holiness, that spiritual body of Jesus Christ, the blood of the New Testament, if I leave that covenant and I go back under, let's just say I moved to Israel and I become a rabbi. I think I could wear the hats really good, and I could do the little hair twirls. I could do that. I think I'd look really good, especially being a ginger. I think I could pull it off. If I went and did that, and I went back under the Mosaical law and helped them build a temple, went and got that red heifer and cut him up and let him bleed out and made an offering, and we really got this thing going. Would I be cursed for leaving the blood covenant of Jesus Christ, the Son of God? Because most people, and I hope 100% of preachers would say, no, you can't leave the covenant of Jesus Christ. But wait a second, if they're blessed, why won't I be blessed if I do the same thing? They can't answer you. They keep going back to they're blessed because they're blessed and God blessed them at one time and they're still blessed, so bless God, they're blessed. That's their answer. It's not a biblical answer. And let's just finish this up. So what did he do? 70th verse. So he forsook Shiloh, then come into the temples. Remember, he destroyed the temples twice. I'm just going to go through the rest of the chapter, jump down to the 70th verse. So he chose David also his servant, took him from the sheepfolds, from following the ewes, great with the young, and he brought them to feed Jacob, his people, and Israel, his inheritance. So he fed them according to the integrity of his heart and guided them by the skillfulness of his hands. You see how God forsook them once in Shiloh, delivered them to the enemy, then brought somebody else to lead them, bring them back up, do good, do what I tell you. feed them, lead them like a flock. He would keep having mercy on them, bringing them back, bringing them back. But they still had the same problem over and over again. This is where it gets ugly. The very next chapter in the first verse. O God, the heathen are come into thine inheritance. God was angry with them in Shiloh. He forsook the tent. He forsook them. He let them go through things. He delivered his glory. In the bondage, he delivered his inheritance to the sword. They were cursed. He brought David up, and Solomon. Solomon built a temple. They flourished. They did this again. God would destroy them with Nebuchadnezzar, put them to the sword, put them to captivity, scatter them throughout the world. You let them come back again. Under Cyrus, build the temple up. Even into their bondage in Rome, they had their temple. They were still in bondage, and they were still doing this. And what happened? When Jesus came in the 19th chapter of Luke, he told them, he said, because thou knewest not the time of thy visitation. God came to visit his people with the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. He said, behold, your enemy's going to cast a trench about you. They're not going to leave you one stone upon another. They're going to kill your children. They're going to scatter you out. The floods of ungodly men are going to come in, and they're going to desecrate your temple because of all these things, all of it. And this time I'm going to scatter you into all the four winds of the world. Sound pretty blessed. And this is where it even gets worse. Almost 2,000 years later, as they wandered in the world, having nowhere to go, a home of their own. Blessed people now. Hitler got a hold of them and turned 6 million of them into ashes. And mainstream Christianity wants to say they're blessed. Now we're at present day. 76 years ago in 1948, these apparent blessed people come back again into their homeland. Not worshiping this man, not acknowledging the Son of God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, the very one that they didn't recognize during the time of their visitation when the Son of God came. Back when the Son of God said, behold, your house is left unto you desolate. He cursed them right then and there. He cursed them because they rejected his word in the flesh. They was rebellious, complaining, stubborn about the commandments written in stone. But when the living word came in the flesh to overcome the world, they closed their eyes, they shut their ears, and they rejected him. Now here we are, 1948. God has mercy again. Lets them back home. I think it's amazing. I think it's great. I really do. Even if there's movements by the political world to make some of these things happen, because their hands are in everything. That's fine. God can use that too. But the point is, God let them back. Do you realize they've been in Israel, back in their homeland, for 76 years? And their Christian population is barely over 2%. And some of them came to live there, and it's not even their homeland. Do you think it's strange that they're still suffering? And do you think it's strange that you would still call them blessed just because they're back home? Quick question before we wrap it up. What What happened to them every time they got to come back home and build that temple? The answer is destruction. I'm not going to get into it tonight, but there's reasons that the third temple doesn't mean anything. Because, and I don't have time to get into tonight, Jesus is the third temple. Matter of fact, when he was here or there at the time, and right there at the temple, he said, "Tear down this temple. 3 days, I'll raise it up." They thought he was talking about that. They was like, "Oh, it took 40 years to build this. You can't. What are you, crazy?" He was talking about the temple of his body. That temple raised the third day eternally, and not just the Jew or the Israelite or the Gentile, but all of them together are now part of that body. That's the true Israel. That's the true Jew. That's the true people of God. People don't want to hear that, but that's just the gospel truth. Psalm 79, first verse, we're just going to read down and I'll be done. He said, "O God, the heathen are come into thine inheritance. Thy holy temple have they defiled. They laid Jerusalem on heaps. The dead bodies of thy servants they have given to be meat unto the fowls of heaven. The flesh of thy saints unto the beasts of the earth." How blessed were they, church, that God fed them to beasts of the earth, the fowls of the air. He let them get butchered and scattered in all the world. How blessed were they just because they were Israel? That's the argument. Just because they're Israel, they're blessed. That does not line up with basic biblical teaching from the beginning of Jacob and Israel to present day. God never blessed them just because of their bloodline. Never. We've been preached things like that. We have believed things like that, but that's not what the Bible teaches. And then it goes on down, it says, "Their blood have they shed like water round about Jerusalem. There was none to bury them. We are become a reproach to our own neighbor, a scorn and a derision to all them that are round about us. How long, Lord, wilt thou be angry forever? Shall thy jealousy burn like fire?" God is still angry. He's showing mercy. He's being long-suffering. He let them back home, but God is still angry that they ain't accepted his son. Now, what's going to happen to them? Do people actually believe that the rejected Messiah, when he splits the eastern sky and comes back for judgment, that he's just going to let Israel slip in because they're blessed? "Come in, blessed Jews, blessed Israelites, come on in. It's me. I know you didn't believe me, but it's me." Or do you think they're still under the wrath of God? We're going to be talking about that this Sunday night, around 8:30, 8:45, probably closer to 8:45. I want you to tune back in and discuss with us. I welcome comments. I welcome if there's other ministers that want to come on, brothers, please type in comments. Let me know. I'll be glad to bring you on. We can fit about 8 or 9 people on there. But it's something that needs to be discussed, because what's happening is, do you realize every dime you donate to Israel, I won't say every dime, I'll say almost every dime you donate to Israel, do you think it goes to a Christian cause? I mean, it's a real question. Do you think that they're taking your money and using it for Christianity to better the gospel of Jesus Christ? They're not. As we come to a close, and I didn't even hardly get out of Psalms 78. There was so much I had. There's a certain, well, I know I'm not going to go there tonight. I love you guys. Psalm 79, right where we're at. 11. Let the sign of the prisoner come before thee. According to the greatness of thy power, preserve thou those that are appointed to die. Listen to what he says. Render unto our neighbors sevenfold unto their bosom their reproach, wherewith they have reproached thee, O Lord. So we, thy people, and the sheep of thy pasture, will give thanks forever. We will show forth thy praise to all generations. Is Israel, after being scattered out into all the world, have they acknowledged the Son of God and praised their Father for sending the Messiah? Oh, they haven't. Appreciate you being with me. I didn't get to see all the comments, but I love you guys. And again, I want everybody to know I am not. I'm pro Israel, Jew. I don't care who you are. I love you. I want you to prosper. I want you to be in health, even as your soul prospers. I don't care what you are, what religion you are. It doesn't matter. I love you. But I can't, in a good conscience, as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, say that you are blessed, no matter who you are, if you don't truly start following the Son of God and realize the judgment that's coming on the world. I can't do that. You might be able to, and that's fine, but I can't do that. God bless you. Until next time, you have been watching the Gospel Message, and I am your host, the Red Rooster.